Hey, Dad, you might hear this little voice inside your head asking you, why bother being a father? And you may even be tempted to throw your hands into the air and just give up altogether. But I pray that you won't do that because we need you. Let me tell you right now, with dads, we need your strength. We need your hard headed devotion and commitment to what is right. Even when everybody tells you that we don't, we do. We need your determination, your love, and your leadership. And why do we need you? Why does the world need you? Why does your church need you? Why does your family need you? Why does your children need you? Because today, when I look around at our culture, I see what the world looks like when dad is absent. So let's take some time. Let's talk about that. Welcome to the Iron Pursuit Podcast, where men are forged by the truth of God's Word. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. This podcast is a call to biblical manhood. Here, we challenge men to rise above comfort, reject passivity, and live under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Each episode is designed to strengthen your faith, sharpen your character, and equip you to lead with integrity, grit, and grace. So whether you're a husband, a father, a brother, or a friend, this is your invitation to pursue the kind of manhood that honors God and changes generations. This is the Iron Pursuit. All right, welcome back to the podcast, guys. I want to thank you so much for joining us again. We are on our 9th episode, I believe. I was doing some research the other day and looking into podcasting and I guess just what happens generally in podcasts. And I was actually reading an interesting statistic, I thought. And it said that 70% of the people who start a podcast never make it past episode 7. Well, we've made it past episode 7. We are actually on episode 9 now. And I hope that you are getting involved with the Iron Pursuit and that you are sharing it, that you're inviting some other men to come and be a part of it as well. Because what we want to do is challenge men to to follow the lordship of Jesus Christ and to come along beside one another and do just like what the name of the podcast is, the Iron Pursuit. Find other men of like-minded, like iron, where they can clash, and they sharpen one another, just like the scripture in Proverbs tells us that just as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. And that's what we want to do here on the Iron Pursuit. And today, what I want to talk to you about is actually a question that I asked a group of men a few years ago, and I want to represent that question today. I will share a little bit of information in this, some information that might be dated, but I've kind of picked up some of it and kind of brought it up to date some. Just because of the references, and I'll make mention of some of those as we go along. But I want to ask a question today: why bother being a father? Why bother being a father? And to answer this question, or to get us started, I want to consider what Luke wrote in Luke chapter 8, verses 40 through 50. Now, I'm not going to read all of this. I'll leave that up to you. I just want to give you an idea of what's going on. There's a man named Jairus, and Jairus has a daughter who has fallen sick, okay? And the story of the man named Jairus is, this is a man who is a very important man. He was actually a ruler in the synagogue there, or, the synagogue being like what would be the religious establishment of that day. Now, most of the synagogue leaders, they were not fans of Jesus, but Jairus is this exception to the rule. I think Jairus was a man probably much like many of us are. He felt like he could probably handle most every circumstance that came his way. Whenever I think about this guy, I don't think he panicked when the septic tank backed up. I don't think he was worried when he had a water leak. And at the very least, Jairus was a man who had connections. I could say that. I think I could say he had connections. And if he couldn't do a job, he knew who to call, who could get the job done. But one day, Jairus' daughter didn't get out of bed like she always did. So Dad went into the room to check on his daughter, and she said, "Hey, Daddy, I don't feel good today." And so Dad tells Mom, because Mom is kind of the doctor nurse mama of the home. And so she comes into the room, notices that little baby girl is running a low grade fever, and so they just let her stay home from school that day, hoping that a day's rest to help her get better. But one day went into 2 days. 2 days ended up being a week, and Jairus' daughter hasn't gotten any better. But a man who has always been able to take care of the problems around the house has now discovered that he can't do this alone. So what does Jairus do? He remembers Jesus. That's what he does. And so often, I think this is exactly what happens to us. When we remember Jesus, most times, let's just be honest, okay? Let's be honest. When we remember Jesus, many times, things have already gotten out of control by the time we remember him. Now, I hope that as you live for Jesus longer and longer and longer, this is not the definition of your life. This is not what defines you. It's not your identity. You don't just call out to Jesus when you have a problem. You should be calling out to him all the time, even in the good times, right? But I think in a lot of our lives, we do this. We call out to Jesus after things have gotten out of control. And it's not a terrible thing to do, but it's an immature thing to do, okay? So I don't want to beat you up over doing something like that. I just want you to know that it's immaturity on your part if that's what you do. So at least what I want to say is at least we're remembering Jesus. But why is it that we tend to remember Jesus only when things get bad? Why is it that we treat Jesus like the spare tire of our truck and we pull him out, whenever the tire's flat? We need to get the tire fixed. And so we put the spare tire on, but as soon as we're able to get the tire fixed, what happens? Well, the spare tire goes back to the tow mode, right? Wherever we tow it and wherever we store it. Maybe you put it in the trunk of your car, whatever it may be. Either way you look at it, Jairus is going to make his way to Jesus. And when he gets there to Jesus, Jesus is stepping out of a boat because he just got back from across the sea there. He had an appointment with a demoniac. You can go and read all of that. Jesus cast the demons out of the guy and cast them into a herd of pigs, and they run down the hill and they drowned. But Jairus is this guy who's concerned for his daughter. He begins to tell Jesus about his daughter, and Jesus agrees to go to Jairus' house. But on the way, this crowd of people gather around Jesus. Now, the reason they gather around is because, Jesus is a popular guy. He's doing all these miracles, and there's this one person in the crowd who kind of steals the show this day. There's this woman who has been sick for 12 years. The Bible actually tells us that she has an issue of blood. In other words, she's bleeding, and nobody is able to stop this. It's just like a woman's cycle, a monthly cycle where she bleeds, but this woman's deal, it would not stop. And so she has tried and tried and tried, and she cannot stop the bleeding. She has paid doctors. Doctors have done all kinds of treatments on her, and they just cannot get it to stop. She has spent every dollar that she has, and she thinks in her mind, okay, I have no other options. I need to go see this man Jesus. I hear everybody talking about him, so I'm going to go see Jesus. So when Jesus gets off the boat, he's walking down the road, he's headed to Jairus' house, and this crowd gathers around Jesus. They're all wanting Jesus to do some miraculous thing for them or just to teach or whatever it may be. And this woman says, if I can just get close enough to him to where I can touch the hem of his garment, then I can be made whole. And so that's what happens, all right? I don't want to spend a lot of time in that, but it was through her faith. She reaches out, she touches the hem of Jesus' garment, she's healed. She feels the power of healing come into her body. Jesus feels the power go out of his body, and he stops and he says, "Who touched me?" Now, I want you to remember that Jairus' daughter is dying, okay? You're the guy who came to Jesus and said, "Hey, Jesus, my daughter's dying. Can you come help me?" Jesus has agreed to come help you. And now Jesus is supposed to be following you to your house to heal your daughter. And Jairus is this guy now. He doesn't know what's going on in the crowd. He just sees this group of people surrounding Jesus, and Jesus is delaying going to Jairus' house. He's not intentionally doing it. It's just happening, although Jesus knew that it was going to happen. Now, from my vantage point, I see Jairus looking back, trying to find Jesus in the crowd, not really being able to see him because there's so many people who are there. I see Jairus wringing his hands in anxiety. I see him just like he's paying close attention to every second that passes because he knows that his daughter does not have much time. I see Jairus acting like men when someone has stepped in front of me in a line. Like he's acting like me. It's not right to skip in front of somebody whenever they're standing in line and waiting. You got to wait your turn. I see Jairus becoming frustrated. I see him becoming angry because he knows his little girl is dying. And you know what? Whenever your little girl is in trouble, there's not really any other girl that matters. There's not any other person that matters. In different translations of the Bible, the Bible tells us that Jairus had a servant, and his servant comes to him, and this is what he says: "Don't bother the teacher anymore." And this is where I get the question, why bother being a father? Why bother being a father? Today, I want you to know that this is a classic move of the enemy of your soul, the devil. He tends to slip up beside you and say, "Hey, man, look around at the world that you're living in. Look at your situation. Look at the mess your family is in. Why bother? Why bother?" As you can see, what you've already been doing is not working. As you can see, the things that you have been trying to put together, it's not helping. Why bother? You know that you are the best at making a mess of your life. Why bother? No one takes you serious anymore. Why bother? When everything is stacked against you, why bother? Why bother being a father? That's what I want to talk about today. Back in 1997, China established a policy in their country called the one-child policy. And the rationale behind this policy was to help limit the growth of their population by allowing each family to only have one child per household. Now, this was announced back in 2015 that the program was going to stop in 2016. Now, if the program had worked so well, why would China want to stop it? Now, nobody was saying that it worked well. I'm asking the question, if it was working, why would you want to stop it? Well, whenever you dig into it just a little bit more, over the years, you find that over the years, families began to have a preference of what sex they wanted their child to be. So since they could only have one child, they opted for having a boy because in their mind they thought, well, the boy is going to carry on the family name. This led to an increase of abortions, especially when the ultrasound began to tell the mother what sex the baby was before it was born. And not only was there an increase in the number of abortions, but infanticide increased as well. You can go back and you can read all about this. It's a true thing. Infanticide began to increase, and so today China is facing a major dilemma. Because they have more men than there were women. They don't have enough women to marry the men in their country. You don't hear a lot about this stuff. You got to kind of do some digging to read about all this stuff. But in a recent article, I say recent, this article was written in 2020. So, you're looking at 5 years ago now. That's 2025. But the article was published in dailymail.com. And the Professor Yu Kwang, actually, he's a 77-year-old man. He actually suggested that Chinese women should be allowed to marry at least 2 men, even more, so that all the Chinese men could find their quote-unquote true love. So there's only one reason why China is facing what has been called their economic time bomb. Go look it up, the economic time bomb of China. And that's simply because they tried to disrupt what God set into order. God said in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, he said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it." Years ago, China had a plan. And at that time, the plan looked like a good idea because they felt like their country was being overpopulated. Today, the plan has been proven to be a disaster for their country. Not only did China have a plan, but America had a plan as well. And every so often, we see a trend where there's new terminology presented to a society. And if everyone in society, or if enough people in society like the word, if they accept the word, if they accept the new definition of that new word, you're going to see that word come up in every news article. It's going to come across every media channel. This is what they would start calling buzzwords. Well, if you'll remember not too long ago, there was a buzz phrase called toxic masculinity, right? It's a term that has been adopted for the most part by feminist groups who want to do nothing more than eradicate what they would identify as the toxicity of maleness. This trend has really continued to grow, and don't be surprised to hear that this movement didn't begin in 2016. This has been a movement that has been coming around for a long, long, long time. It's kind of been in our news for the last 9, 10, 11 years. That has really been kind of hanging around. But the idea of removing the man from the picture began a long time ago. This is kind of how I began to notice it. So I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm one of those 70 babies. I'm a 79 model. And I began to notice the change through TV shows. Back in the day, we actually watched TV shows. There were only certain nights of the week when it came on. And those of you who are of that age, or you may remember TV shows called Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver. These were TV shows where there was a stable father figure who made clear decisions and led their families. It was really, really good TV shows. And then all of a sudden, that kind of faded out because, the man becomes toxic. Oh, there's this man who's making decisions. There's this man who's leading. And all of a sudden, you see these TV shows that come out, for example, The Simpsons, and then you have the Family Guy. And the two fathers that are portrayed in those two cartoon TV shows, they are overweight, beer-drinking buffoons. They laugh like dummies. They're stupid. They don't make good decisions. And they're trying to downplay the man in these shows. And ever since those days, there has been this constant feeding of our culture from the buffet of lies that tries to convince us that any man who has played football, baseball, basketball, or ever acted in any role, any masculine role, has now become toxic to our society. I think it's bull crap. You heard me right. I think it's bull crap. But this idea has become so contagious in our culture that almost every man who was running for, if you'll remember back, when the Democratic presidential nomination, even including Joe Biden, back whenever all of those guys, when they were trying to run for the seat of the president, they made it clear that they would all choose a woman to be their running mate, because what they said was that they feel that it is now time for women to be seen as powerful, ready, and capable to sit in the most powerful seat in the world. Now, if you're a lady watching this, I just want you to know firsthand, before you get all upset with me, just know that I don't have a problem with women taking on roles of authority or leadership or whatever it may be. Don't get me wrong here. But this is what I do have a problem with. I have a problem with sexual organs in a person's body suddenly becoming the qualification for them to be a presidential running mate. Whenever a person's gender, their sex, all of a sudden, that is the qualification for them to have a job or qualify for something. Why can't we just really keep it simple here, okay? Remember the old saying, keep it simple, stupid? Why can't we just keep it simple here? What's wrong? All right, here, I'm going to give you this monumental idea. What's wrong with having the person who is best suited and qualified for the job? Why not? Boy, that's a big deal. And it takes a lot to get to a conclusion like that. It's crazy. But now let me kind of point out some of the hypocrisy of this idea. This is what I see, that that the hypocrisy I see in all of this is that nowhere along the way did we ever hear, and I know I'm reaching back and I'm grabbing some things that are kind of dated, but remember Elizabeth Warren? She tried to run for the presidential seat as well. I never heard her say, "Hey, I must choose a woman to be my running mate." She didn't do that. We hear of all of this toxic masculinity and the demonizing of men because of the raunchy way that they act, right? That's why they say it's toxic masculinity, because they say men act raunchy, right? But now we've got this mixed up idea in our culture that men can be women and women can be men. I want you to just think about Ellen DeGeneres for a moment. She is a known lesbian, and she clearly takes on the male role in her relationship. She has openly disrespected Katy Perry openly talking about Katy Perry, making very disrespectful comments about her body. And they just say it's all good, no harm's done. Why? Because it's a woman talking to another woman, but it's a woman who's taken on the role of a man in a relationship. If there had been a man due to Katy Perry, what Ellen did to her, they would have hung that guy by his testicles, if you know what I'm saying. This is hypocrisy at its deepest level. Whenever leaders in our culture stand up and say things such as, we don't need men, we aren't where we are today because of men, we're here because of some very strong women. Whenever people stand up and they say all men are bullies, when women or any leader says all masculinity is evil and bad and unhealthy, this is when people begin to believe what they're being told. And they begin to tell their sons that what God has given them is a curse and it's not a blessing to the world. It's a lie. It's a lie. Whenever people come around and they try to say we don't need men, it's a lie. You do need men. Whenever they say, hey, what we have today was not built by men, well, it's a lie. They try to say, well, it's built by strong women. Well, that's a lie. It's not a complete lie, because without women, none of us would be here. But guess what? Without men, none of us would be here. All masculinity is not bad. All masculinity is not unhealthy. In fact, good masculinity is very much healthy. It's very much healthy. So whenever I put all of this out there, I'm gonna ask the question again: why bother? Whenever the world tries to push you down, push you away, why bother? When you look around at the strong, God-fearing men in our world who have actually made a difference, how can anyone say that their masculinity is a curse? The only ones believing this are those who want to redefine what God has already instituted. The good men of this world, they look around at what's happening, and many of them hear the voice of the devil in their ear whispering, why bother? Why bother being a father? What's the use? They don't appreciate what you have to offer. They hate you anyway. Everything you do ends up being wrong. Why bother? And I want to tell you why, my guy. I want to tell you why you need to bother. The problems that we have in our world today are directly related to a lack of truth. Directly related to a lack of truth. Or maybe I should just use the quote from President Ronald Reagan where he said, "The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so," end quote. Have you ever heard of the significance of a father's influence? If not, listen to what I'm about to tell you. There is rock hard evidence that dads really have a uniquely important impact on the lives of their children and their families. Dr. David Popenoe, I was about to say his name wrong, but it's Dr. David Popenoe. He actually wrote this. He said, and I quote, "Fathers are far more than just second adults in the home. Involved fathers, especially biological fathers, bring positive benefits to their children that no other person is likely to bring." He continues by saying, "They provide protection and economic support and male role models. They have a parenting style that is significantly different from that of a mother, and that difference is important in healthy child development." One of the most important things I want you to pay attention to what Dr. Popenoe said is that a dad's parenting style is significantly different. Now, answer the question for this question. Is different wrong? No, it's not wrong. Different is just different. Hey, thank God for differences, okay? Guess what? If there was not the difference of male and female, none of us would be here. God made us different. And all of us have probably noticed that dads love their children more dangerously than mothers do, right? Dads play rougher. It wasn't my wife who was coercing my son to jump off the refrigerator into my arms. I was the one doing that. How many of you moms out there, I want you to just think about it. How many guys, answer me this question. How many moms out there ever competed against other moms to see who could throw their kid the highest in the air and catch them before falling to the ground? That's what I thought. Men are more likely to encourage risk-taking in their child's life. Men provide kids with a broader diversity of social experiences. And believe it or not, dads introduce their children to a wider variety of methods of dealing with life. Dads tend to stress rules. We stress justice and fairness. We stress duty and discipline. And in doing so, dad teaches his children the consequences between right and wrong. Listen, dads give their kids insight into the world of men, which is something women just simply cannot do. No matter how hard women try, they cannot bestow masculinity. And dad, no matter how hard you try, you cannot bestow femininity. God created us the way that he created us for a reason. He created us different. A child is better prepared for the challenges in life when a man is around, when dad is around. And guess what else is interesting? This is interesting. Listen to this. Children learn the meaning of respect between the sexes if a dad actually bothers being a father. I'm going to repeat that. Children learn the meaning of respect between the sexes if dad bothers being a father. And just to expound on that thought just a little bit further, the Focus on the Family research, they said that research indicates that married fathers are substantially less likely to abuse their wives and their children more than men in any other category. Married men. Like it or not, fathers encourage competition and they encourage independence. When a child falls and scrapes his elbow, I want you to think about it. Think about it. When a child falls and scrapes his elbow, who jumps up and runs to the child first? Mama usually does. But have you ever blamed dad for not moving quite as fast? Have you ever looked over and be like, man, he really didn't care that his child was hurt and just didn't get up and run to it? Have you ever noticed that dads just don't do that? They don't. Have you ever said, well, he doesn't care if his kid drives his eye out. He don't care. He doesn't love them at all. Well, believe it or not, it is actually built into a man not to jump up and run to the child's rescue, because men tend to want to teach their child how to deal with problems and figure things out on their own. There are so many studies. If you'll go out there and just do some research, there are so many studies. I think I looked at over 100 different studies on parent-child relationships that concluded that having a loving and nurturing father was just as important to a child's happiness, well-being, and social and academic success as having a loving and nurturing mother. You can't say that a father is not important. And believe it or not, some of those studies showed that having father love was a stronger contributor to a child's good behavior. Dad, you might hear that little voice inside your head asking you, why bother being a father? You may even be tempted to throw your hands up and just say, hey, why? And you may just want to give up. And you may want to say, why do it? And I'm telling you right now, Dad, you need to do it because we need your strength. We need your hard-headed devotion. We need your commitment to what's right. We need your determination. We need your love. We need your leadership. And why do we need you? Because our culture is in a mess. And whenever I look around at our culture, I see the results of not having men in our homes. I see the results of what absentee fatherhood looks like. Todd Starnes said, I quote, instead of a country full of manly men, our universities want a nation full of pajama boys, end quote. Whenever I look at all the chaos happening in our world today, I see a generation whose fathers were absent. I see children in adult bodies who have been taught entitlement rather than problem solving. I see freeloader mentality that has taken the place of work ethic and capitalism. I see the depravity of the heart and a disregard for the fellow man. And what I don't see enough of are men like this guy, Jairus, that I'm talking to you about from the Gospel of Luke. Men who are willing to stand up to the devil and look him in the face and tell him why you bother being a God-fearing father. You see, it's true. You may have a child that's sin sick, but the question is, are you willing to bring that child to the feet of Jesus? You may have a child who is consumed with porn, sexual immorality, homosexuality, drug and alcohol addiction. The question is, are you willing to bring that child to the feet of Jesus? You may be a father who has been tempted to give up and just walk away because you're falling for the notion of why bother. But do you understand that there is a very, very serious reason for you to bother? There's a very serious reason. You should bother being a good father, because if you don't, you neglect God's intention for your life. When you walk away, you forfeit the position that God gave you. And today, I want you men to know that you do not have to apologize for who you are. You do not have to apologize for the color of your skin. You do not have to apologize for your economic status. You do not have to apologize for the place that you were born. For you to apologize about any of that is for you to admit or to say or to suggest that God has made a mistake in making you who you are. And I rebuke that. God has not made a mistake in making you who you are. I refuse to apologize for who God made me to be. So please, make the bother and take your role as a father. Hey guys, thanks again for listening. Remember, share, like, and subscribe. If you think this podcast could help someone else, please share it with them. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at The Iron Pursuit. If you're interested in my personal or marriage coaching, send me an email at theironpursuit79@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. And remember, never run from the clashing, because that is where the iron is sharpened.